Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining to break down the Anzac round for rugby league is my good mate, Sixties. Big fella, obviously it's been a tough week for the Parramatta Eels. We've talked about it ad nauseum in the Instant Reaction and News podcast, but we're here to preview some football today with the Eels playing Manly across the Jersey Flegg New South Wales Cup in the form of the Blacktown Workers Eagles, and of course the NRL, the main event there out at Four Pines Park on Friday night. It wasn't too long ago that we caught up for the News podcast. How you been in the meantime?
Yeah, not too bad actually, mate. I got up to Eels training today, the captain's run for their match with Manly. Got to see the jersey presentation with Ethan Sanders, his family there, involved in that presentation. I took a video, not of the presentation, because that's all up for Eels media, and it's not that you would hear anything because I wasn't anywhere near the assembled players to do that. But I took a video of the development up there, which I will put on our Instagram page. So if you're not aware that we have an Instagram page, so I'll put up video later today of how the Kellyville Centre of Excellence development is coming along, so you can have a look for yourself about that. It looks to me like it might possibly be ahead of schedule. I mean, I can't say that for certain, but certainly since the last time that I put video up of what it looks like, it seems to have progressed quite a bit. I'll also put up video while I was there and before the main part of the captain's run started. There was the minute silence for Anzac Day. So the last post was played and all the players just stood there. Now, again, I didn't film the players because that's not my place to go filming what happens at training, but I did film the grounds there with the music playing over the loudspeaker in the background. And I thought that was a nice touch for the players there to remind them what this weekend is. Not that they needed reminding as such, but it just, you know what I mean? It just helps to keep it at the forefront of their minds. No, I shouldn't say that. Look, the football still has to be at the forefront of their minds, but they can't lose sight of the fact that this is a special weekend. It's a solemn day today as we record it. And for them, when they're taking part in the match, they'll be wearing that special jersey, and there is a meaning behind it. And I guess all of these things go to reminding them that there is it is something special and something to be thankful for with occasions like Anzac Day.
Yes, Anzac Day, I know it's a public holiday, but it's not really a holiday, is it, 60s? The significance behind the day and the sacrifice made most prominently, of course, in 1914-18 and then 39-45 for the two world wars, but then other conflicts in between. But the stuff that has helped build the peaceful country or countries that we live in across the world now. So, yeah, good to see the club not just acknowledging it, but practicing it even when they're not playing, because I know Anzac Day is now a banner day for the NRL. They play 3 games of football today. We saw the Titans upset the Warriors earlier today, and as we record, the Dragons and the Roosters are playing. But yeah, even for the teams not playing, it is important, I think, that they observe that and understand the significance of this day.
And I think that's probably the important part, without spending too much time on this, because this is a rugby league podcast, but it is a significant day, and I think sometimes there may be individuals or organisations that might drift down the path of treating it like a celebration day. It's not a celebration day. You can't celebrate war. I know that there were, at the time, there was the victory days, which were celebrated by the people who were living through those times. But when we have occasions like Anzac Day and like Remembrance Day, I think Remembrance Day says it in the name itself, that
exactly.
time to reflect
And
on
the whole
people.
motto being "lest we forget," right?
Exactly. So anyone out there, to people who are currently in the armed forces, to those who've served in the past, to those who've had family members who have served in order to help bring peace across the world and to defend the country, no matter what what war it was in, what conflict it was in, or what type of service is being provided now. Thank you for that service, and today is a day to be thinking and thanking thinking of and thanking such people. So, but we do move on, mate, and this is our preview podcast, and as such, we thank our sponsor, which is Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan, and Parramatta. Again, Greg and the team in those three offices have been there right from the start, just about, with supporting the Cumberland Throw. And we have to say, as always, we just couldn't get this done without their support. So thank you to them. And, mate, we've got three big games, but we're probably going in reverse order almost, aren't we?
Yeah, always starting with the Flegg. So not necessarily in chronological order, given that the Flegg play on Saturday and the New South Wales Cup play on Sunday. So we're sort of a one day or over the weekend here for the free grades. But plenty of football to talk about, 60s. And with Parramatta, it's even when you're losing, it's never dull, is it? There's always plenty to talk about and discuss. And let's start in the Flegg, where there's been a few changes in the back line. And we talked about it on Team West Tuesday in our news podcast, but Eels take on the Manly Warringah Seagulls out at Four Pines Park on Saturday, 12:30 p.m. So if you're going to get out there, make sure you get ready for some sunshine. Looks like it's going to be good weather. And they're taking on, if I just quickly check the ladder, because I don't think they don't have the positional places here. We know that the Eels are still chasing their first win, so it's not exactly like they're high up in the ladder. But Manly, they're 3 wins from 5 starts, sorry. So they're mid-table, surprisingly, for that record. 3 wins, 2 losses. So that's 6 points. And their top of the table is the Canberra Raiders at 10 points, 5 wins, 1 losses, 1 loss. 1 is a singular, not plural. And obviously the Eels narrowly pipped by the Raiders just a couple of weeks ago. They've been very close on a number of times. They take on the Seagulls, though, looking like this. At fullback, it's our latest Queensland recruit in Tyler Cuthbert. On the wings, Muhammad Al-Madeen, fresh out of the SG ball, making his second Flegg cap. On the other wing, it's Bo Newlands, who joined the club last year. It's our first look at him this season, though. In the centres, you got Antioch Vitala Mariner, another Queensland recruit. First look at him as well. At centre, it's Dom Destritis, a back row by trade, but plugging a hole there for the Eels. In the back line, in the halves, Te Huranui Apanui Tweedle, or Apa Tweedle, as we like to call him more commonly, is partnering Joshua Lynn. Apa looked like he had a good game last week, 60s, bagged a Hattie and 4 goals, I think it was. So plenty of
and
points
held, and I think lost the ball over the line
on
another occasion. So, yeah.
Could have had the double, Hattie. So he bagged 20 points, could have had 26 there. But he's partnering Joshua Lynn. I don't think the halves have been an issue with this team, 60s. And if anything, they've been, well, I say halves, up and now in the halves as of last week. They've been pretty consistent for this squad. It's just the stuff in between the margins, it feels like, in terms of completion rates and seizing some opportunities. But that takes us to the forward pack, where we've got Big Sam Tuavati. He partners Saxon Pry, a couple good prospects there in the front row. Riley Smith is at dummy half. Back row sees Will Latu and Jock Brazel on the edges. Max Tupou is the lock forward. On the interchange, Yaya Ayachi is the dummy half utility. And then, as we mentioned on Team West Tuesday, it's a real Queensland influence here. Damascus Nemia, Lance Forlima, and LeBron Tuala. I believe they're all from north of the border, and they're all big units on the interchange. Taking on a Manly Warringah Seagulls team. I'm just going to pass their team list quickly, see if there's anyone we might recognise. 60s. Nick Lenars, former Parramatta Eels prospect there. He's dummy half and captain for the Manly team. And honestly, I'm not really seeing any names jump out at me here. So no bloodline or second generation names, no former Eels prospects as they want to do outside of obviously Nick there. But yeah, 12:30 p.m. kickoff here. Manly mid-table, Parramatta chasing their first win. They've been so close. You know, I think their record belies their effort across the last month, really. And I know we've been down on them in the sense that they haven't gotten a win, but the effort has been, or the applied effort has been there, but perhaps just some of the finishing moments, like the ability to convert some of the hard work they've done, is where they probably let themselves down.
Yeah, last week they had pretty much complete control of the match. A call goes against them, and then the whole momentum changed. So they went from 24-12 up to losing 36-24, all in the space of probably about 25 minutes, something like that. So it was a bit of a harsh turnaround there. There was plenty to like about the performance, and when I say plenty to like, I saw a lot more positives in their game than what I'd seen in previous viewings of the team. The back line, you've got, as I said, you've got Muhammad Al-Amadeen coming up from the SG Ball. He was very solid in his first appearances in the team. So he gets a tick out there on the wing. Tyler Cuthbert, that was his first game last week, and also was quite solid. There was a decision that went against him where he was called for a knock-on, and that was that unlucky call that I spoke about just a moment ago. But apart from that, he looked very lively coming into the attack. Halves went very well. Forwards as well. Riley Smith is always busy, and I thought that the forwards had real momentum going through the Roosters last week, but just one of those games where I guess this year both the Flegg and the New South Wales Cup are probably finding ways to lose rather than ways to win. And we know that just as winning can be a habit, losing can be a habit as well. We just need them to snap out of this. Look, I think they're a chance of snapping out of it. They've had quite a big injury toll, a massive injury toll I've been informed of in the Jersey Flegg. So there are a lot of names that we're starting to see come back.
And that's part of the problem with our reporting of Flegg, is that we're not privy to suspension and injury reports. So unless we actually see it on the field, and sometimes there's an obvious injury, you'll see someone roll an ankle or do something serious, and okay, well, he's going to be out for a while. But there's a lot of stuff in between where you guys get banged up, but you don't pick up in coverage, and you can't, when they're not in the team list next week. Is it form? Is it suspension? Is it injury? You're not sure. So yeah, not surprised to hear that they've had a big injury toll, 60s, because that's been reflective in some of the teams they've named in terms of changes that have been enforced, but maybe not understood, at least from a fan perspective.
Yeah, and it's really tough to have them playing in front of any support as well, because let's face it, they're all over the place. A few weeks ago, their home game at the last minute was switched from New Era at Parramatta, which was not ideal anyway, because it was being played at the same time as New South Wales Cup was being played at CommBank Stadium. And then they flipped that to Crestwood Reserve at Baulkham Hills. So there's not going to be too many Eels supporters. They're going to be able to get out to Crestwood Reserve at Baulkham Hills when the New South Wales Cup is playing at the same time at CommBank Stadium as the curtain raiser to the NRL game.
Mm-hmm.
But how can you get around to watch these games? You can't. And then last week, there they are out at Wentworth Park with the New South Wales Cup team. And now this week, with the New South Wales Cup team playing on Sunday out at Blacktown Workers ground out at Blacktown, I would have thought they might have played the Jersey Flegg as the curtain raiser. No, for whatever reason, they're playing it on a Saturday at Brookvale Oval.
Yeah, the Jersey. There are some real issues with the Jersey Flegg, aren't they? Yeah, it's hierarchy, it's place in the game. It feels like the unwanted stepchild of the game right now.
If they're going to play one or the other,
I know why.
Whether they're playing at Brookvale or whether they're playing at Blacktown,
exactly.
Put them both there.
Exactly.
And on the same day. And I mean,
I know it bled money, and that's why it came to an end. But it's crazy to think that as recently as 2017, we had the Holden Cup, the national youth competition, where it was a nationalised competition that was set alongside every registered NRL club. So every team played every team from the, like in a junior semblance as a curtain raiser, and I know it bled money, but it felt like a legitimate pathway to the NRL, didn't it? So, and I'm not against them scaling it back down, but where it is right now, it does not feel like it fits into the picture. You know, every game clashes with a reserve grade game or a junior rep game, and the junior rep games I get sometimes, like that happens, but the fact that it's clashing with Reggie's means that you can't have players backing up or being shadowed for the 2 games to figure out what the best spot is. It's a very weird situation right now with the Jersey Flegg.
And when you think about it, you've got the Eels are playing first grade Friday night Brookvale. They're playing Jersey Flegg Saturday midday at Brookvale, and they're playing Sunday 3:00 in New South Wales Cup. Like, now, I know that there are issues because the New South Wales Rugby League do the draw for the New South Wales Cup and for Jersey Flegg, and it's their jurisdiction there. And they've got to try to make the draw fit in where you've got an NRL draw that doesn't have all New South Wales teams. So it's, and they've got to try and work around ground availability and a whole lot of issues that make a draw really difficult. But man, the Jersey Flegg, they are really, really treated, in my opinion, like the poor cousins out of all of this.
It's rough.
So
it's rough, and it comes back to the thing you talk about with both Flegg and Cup and that aspiration and that connection to first grade, and it's just not there. Not just for the Parramatta Eels, it's not there for every club right now. It's a very odd place for the Flegg to be. So anyway,
and the thing is, John, what's tough is that there are a select number of players who that have done an NRL preseason, or might get called in occasionally to help out in an NRL training session, and then come the weekend, they're running around at Crestwood, or they're running around at Wentworth Park, or whatever the case may be. It's just, it's not ideal. I don't know what the answer is, because we're never going to see 3 grades played on match days any time ever again, I don't believe. No. So anyway, quick tip, John, what's your thoughts on this one? Can they get the job done against Manly?
Look, based on the results we've seen recently, they're going to be competitive and they're going to give themselves an opportunity to win. I don't doubt that there is the ability to win and win quite a few games in this team after what we've seen across the last 4 or 5 weeks. What I do question is whether they'll have the luck, that series of breaks their way that's going to carry them to the victory, which is what I think it will take at this point. And a bit of luck can go a long way. If they get that, I think they can beat Manly. I think the reasonable tip is for a Manly victory here at home. But if our boys get the win here, maybe they could build with it. So I'm going to be optimistic in that regard. I think Manly should be firm favourites. But another week with a newly installed fullback, that's going to help there. Tyler Cuthbert gets more familiar with the squad. Same thing with Arpa Tweedle and Joshua Lynn. They get the build in the halves, with Arpa continuing to make that transition from 1 to 6. But yeah, got some more question marks in the back line. We've got a couple of new faces there in Bow and Antioch. So I have to wait and see how they handle Flegg. But I will tip a Manly win, but knowing our boys are going to be competitive, and maybe me tipping against them is what they need. Yeah,
look, based on what I've seen so far this year and the improvement that I saw last week, I'm going to tip the Eels to win with a margin of 6 to 8 points.
Mm-hmm.
So there we go. I'm going to remain optimistic there. So we now switch to the New South Wales Cup, mate, which you said is Sunday, 3 p.m. HE Laybutt Field out at Blacktown.
Yes, and if you can't get out to Blacktown, you can catch this one on New South Wales Rugby League TV. Nice to have that one broadcast there. I'm not sure what my weekend plans are, but if I can't get out there, it's going to be on my tablet 100%. So I just go back to, I'm going to quickly put up Parramatta's schedule here? Because these two teams did meet back in round 3 where Blacktown Workers Eagles ended up romping to a 40-20 victory. But the game wasn't really... It was one of those ones where they raced out to a lead. Eels pegged it back before half-time, then had a bit of a run in the second half before Manly stormed home for a couple of tries in the 61st and 75th minute to put it beyond doubt. And this is going to be, I assume, where are my team lists here? Is this a Manly team without... Yeah, it should be without Josh Schuster, it looks like, following the release being negotiated between him and the Seagulls. But for the Eels, the Parramatta Eels, there are sea eels. There are also freshwater eels. So technically it could be the Parramatta Sea Eels, I suppose, even though they're inland. But we look like this. Zach Sinney is at fullback again after turning out there last week against the Roosters. Jake Tungor and Isaac Lumi are on the flanks. Lumi record with Mike Acevo. I believe, is that Lumi play last week, 60s? No.
Yeah, Lumi played last week.
No Mike Acevo, which means Jake Tonga goes from the centres, I believe, to the wing is the change there. Samuel Louisiu is in one of those three-quarter spots with Sean Russell being dropped from first grade to take over at the other centre position. Blaze Talangi, another guy to come back from NRL. He's turning out number 6 this week. He's partnering Dejan Arce, 60s. Are we expecting Dejan to have full go? He took a pretty hefty knock to the head against the Dolphins on the weekend. So I don't know. Is he past concussion protocols?
Well, I did see him out at Wentworth Park on Sunday. He looked quite well. I believe he must have got through the protocols this week.
Okay.
It was known at the start of the week that the Eels were trying to, make
Change
sure that it had been downgraded to
the Cat 2, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which means no mandatory 11-day stand down. You'll be subject to follow-up tests, and if that's the case, it would seem that he has passed those tests, so look for him to partner Blaze in the halves. Into the front row, we see another player coming back from NRL, Luca Moretti. I love Luca's energy. 60 just needs to work on those ball handling skills on the first possessions. It feels like it's always his first carry, so gets that under wraps. I think he'll be back in NRL in short time. Wiramu Greg is the other bookend, Matt Arthur at dummy half. Back row sees Dan Keir, Matt Dory on the edges. Charlie Guymer, another young gun there. He's at lock forward. Manny Luke, Jock Brazel, Brock Parker, and Reece Alderton are on the interchange. Now, the only question mark I have about the interchange 60s is that Jock Brazel is also named on the edges in Jersey Flegg. So have to wait and see if he turns out on this Saturday, I suppose. Because if he plays then, he probably won't play Sunday given the restrictions around playing minutes in senior football. But if he doesn't play, then expect him to take his place on the bench on Sunday against the Blacktown Workers Eagles.
Yeah, he certainly played well last week in Jersey Flegg. And I'm sure, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, it might have been a combination tackle between he and Saxon Pryke off the top of my head. I mean, it absolutely rattled the ground there, forced the ball loose at a key moment against the Roosters last week. But, I'm expecting that he will play New South Wales Cup, but I guess we'll see there. The other interesting one, of course, is the Arthur brothers will be playing against each other for the second time this season.
Not named, though. Jake will drop back, I expect, to play, yeah.
Yeah, he will. So we've seen that many times with the Sea Eagles New South Wales Cup team, that they don't name a whole host of players that are listed as the fresh reserves or the extended reserve list for the NRL team, and they end up dropping back and playing in an assorted jersey numbers in the New South Wales Cup, and I expect that will happen again. So if the people want to see the Arthur brothers go against each other on Sunday, as you say, they can either get out to Blacktown or catch it on New South Wales Rugby League TV. Mate, I'm going to do my utmost to actually get out there in person. I know you are saying that you are likely to be you're probably going to be unlikely to get out there, but I'll try and be out there at the game itself. A few things just to tie up as loose ends before being able to confirm that. But look, I'm looking forward to this because, as you said, the last time they played each other, there was a real opportunity for the Eels to not just work their way back into the game, which they did at one point, but to go on with it. They weren't able to go on with it. And I think based on what we saw last week, a 9-1 penalty count against the Eels. Like it was, I called it as it was happening, that it just seemed to be so lopsided. I had no idea that the count was actually that. But as people who heard our podcast earlier this week, the news podcast, when you said what was my guess on it, my guess was 9-1, and it turned out that was actually the penalty count from the game. And as we banged on about so many times, John, it's not the 9 penalties that's the issue. And people will say, oh, you know, what's your problem with a lopsided penalty count? Because obviously where there's one team that's doing the wrong thing and deserving to be penalised. Well, if you've given away 9 penalties, that's fair enough. But we can guarantee you one thing, that it is rare that there is one team that is really bad and the other team is near faultless. And that's basically what happens when you get a 9-1 penalty count. So I can assure you that the Eels' discipline was not 9 times worse than the Roosters' discipline. And there were opportunities for the officials to blow a penalty the other way, or to make a call go the other way. It didn't. I'm not saying that there was anything in it, but this is what can sometimes happen, where an official just doesn't seem to pick up what's happening from one team. And I don't know, maybe it's because the team that's offending so much, because they keep offending, the referees keep a closer eye on them. Maybe that's the case. It's human nature that they're going to look at one team just a little bit closer if they have had a run of penalties. But, it was a pretty rough day in terms of decisions. I'm expecting that if they are a little bit tighter with their discipline, the Eels, that this was one of the better performances of the year. As I said, they were unlucky. I'd like to think they're working towards a win. We saw them get their first win the previous week against Norse, who were the Melbourne Storm feeder club, and they should have made it back-to-back wins. Hopefully, they can register their second win this week against Manly.
Yeah, well, for me, the fortune of this team, it feels weird saying it given how young he is, but it rests a lot on the shoulders of young Budzafa, and how Kalo can keep him both fresh but also involved in the game. Manny Luke's a solid deputy, but the team does drop in intensity when Matty goes off, so keeping him in the fray will be key to Parramatta staying on top, in my estimation. If they can do that, and he can stay, not get his ribs rattled like he did last week, and get rubbed out for a little bit there, I think they'll be in for a real chance against the Blacktown Workers Eagles.
Yeah, the thing about Buds Arthur is that he is really good at reading a game, and it's really all about that constant vision that he has with what's unfolding in front of him. He's very good at counting numbers, at seeing where opportunities are. He picks the right time to go a blindside play if it's on, to work a ruck play, to kick out a dummy half. He's got his attacking arsenal is, it's well advanced for a young player, but he's as tough as nails as well when it comes to defence. So you're right. There's a lot of attack that starts and ends around Buds, a lot of the composure that starts and ends around Buds. So, look, it's a solid pack, isn't it, around him, with Luca and Woody in the middle. Charlie Geimer, I thought, had a real cracking game at 13 last week. I really think that when the time's right later this season, he might get an NRL debut as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you what, he's going to deserve it.
He's building very nicely, 60s. Usually, there are some guys that just get to cup as a young kid and they just shine, and that's, the real blue chip elite, like guys that are just destined for the NRL and to be stars in the NRL. But every good prospect below that sort of gets the cup and you see him hit a wall. And to be fair, Buds hasn't yet either, and I think Buds is a very, very talented prospect that probably trends closer to the former than latter. But Charlie hasn't hit a wall. He's just going about his business every week, making his tackles, hitting his lines, doing the right stuff. And that is a very commendable trait to see in a young prospect like him. So the fact that he's just getting through the workload week in and week out, you don't see it that often. And I think it does start to align towards maybe a later season debut, regardless of how the Eels are travelling in all the drama and stuff that's going on for the NRL and whatnot. I think that Charlie is building very, very nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, I think he'll be, once he does start to get exposure to that NRL level, he's got a big, long career coming up at the elite level. I really believe that. For people that haven't seen too much of Charlie Geimer, he's got that capacity to play edge or middle. He played centre when he was in Harold Matts, and played for New South Wales. Is it 19s, under 19s?
19s, yeah.
Yeah,
He
played.
I know that the limelight was stolen by the three Ethan, Strange, Sanders and Ferguson, but he was very good behind them in that contest.
Yeah, played left edge from memory in that game.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, so anyway, mate, time for a tip in this game.
I will tip our boys to win. I don't know if it's going to be a big win, but I think, like I said, it's going to be predicated on Matt Arthur staying in the game as much as possible. Keen to see how Arcee and Talangi combine, I suppose, as well. This is going to be their first game without Ethan Sanders. So it'd be interesting to see how the team looks like in his absence. But I think they can get this one done.
Yeah, I'm going to tip a 4 to 6 point win in this one as well.
Before you going to tip a 4 to 6 point game, I was like, geez, it's going to be a bit of a torrid one out there. And of course, that brings us to the main event, 60s in the NRL, and the one that takes place tomorrow. So chronologically, the most closest game, rather, not most recent, hasn't happened already. Seagulls in 5th place, hosting the 14th placed Parramatta Eels. Manly coming off what could have been the Gold Coast Titans' breakthrough victory last week. Instead, they got that this week against New Zealand Warriors over in New Zealand. Down 12-0, then up 27-12, winning 27-24. Never change, Gold Coast, you crazy sons of guns. But Manly barely holding on last week, and they come into this game looking like this. Tom Trbojevic in the number one, Jason Saab and Tommy Talau on the wings, Tolotau Kula and Ruben Garrick in the centres, Brooks and Cherry Evans, who's their captain, the halves, Paseka and O'Shea Ole or Josh Ayuai in the front row, Lachlan Croker at dummy half. Back row sees the weapon that is Hamoli Olakawatu on their right edge, Corey Waddell on the left, Jake Trbojevic at lock forward, Carl Lawton, who recently signed with the Cowboys, I believe, is in their utility spot. Ethan Bullimore, Matthew Lodge, and Nathan Brown round out their rotation. Extended roster, and expect these guys to turn out on Sunday, by the way. Aaron Woods, Jake Arthur, Jackson Barlaw, Dean Madison, and Gordon Chen Kum Tong. For the Parramatta Eels 60s, we roll like this at fullback, and he is continuing to battle a pretty nasty knee condition, it looks like. The captain, Kilton Gufferson. Mike Acevo gets a recall on the back of a pretty good showing against the Roosters last week. He's on the left wing. That pushes Bailey Simonson to the right wing. We already talked about Sean Russell. He is back in cup. Will Penasini's on that right edge with Bailey. Morgan Harper on the left with Micah. In the halves, we have a debutant, Ethan Sanders, the Colonel, making his debut. A halfback by trade, but number 6 on his back this week, deferring to Dylan Brown. And we'll talk about that relationship in that partnership shortly, 60s, what we're going to be expecting of the two halves. Front row sees RCG and Junior Barlaw named to start. As always, there's a bit of an asterisk around Junior there, with Joe Ofengahi most likely to come into the starting lineup. Joe Lussick is at number 9. Lane and Madison on the right edge. Maddo coming into the starting team to replace Bryce Cartwright, who has succumbed to that rib injury once again with the bye in our... Sorry, I got a bit of a frog in the throat there. With a bye just in the corner of our eyes past this game, made sense to try and get Bryce back to not necessarily 100%, but as back to full fitness as possible, which means Maddo's there this week. Jermaine Hopgood is a lock forward. On the interchange, Brendan Hands is back to deputise Joey Lussick. I like that call. I would like to see Brendan get some good minutes being used in that role as well. I think Joey's fatiguing pretty badly last couple of rounds. Makatoa of the Macca-Hesse variety is on the interchange as well. That's his season debut, isn't it, 60s? He hasn't turned out this year, has he?
No. And that's a very interesting way that you point that Makatoa of the Macca-Hesse variety.
Yeah. It does sound like some sort of like a genus for flora, doesn't it? Good name there for Macca there. And he's joined by Joe Ofungahi, or at least temporarily until Joe gets promoted to the starting team, and Kelma Tuolangi, another player to have a good game in reserve grade last week. Extend the roster: Russell, Moretti, RC, Greg, and Talangi, although we're not expecting any changes. Jared Sutton has the whistle. Ashley Klein is in the box. Yikes. But the Eels, well, like we said in the news podcast 60s, I've washed my hands of Darwin. I don't think there's anything constructive to take from it. This week we've seen the players come into the media spotlight and take onus for the results on the field. I think RCG was spearheading that, saying that criticism towards the coach is unfounded and it's the players that are letting him down. And it is well and good, and I'm certainly not going to put the boot into RCG here. I think taking responsibility is a big part of being a senior player, but you're talking the talk. Now it's time to walk the walk. Again, we're 7 rounds into this competition. The Parramatta Eels are 3-4. It's not like they're 0-6 or 0-5-1 like the Gold Coast. 0-6, 1-6 now like the Titans because they've got the extra game played now, or 0-5-1 like 1-0-5. There we go, like the Rabbitohs. 1 win, 5 losses, no draws. But the results against the Canberra Raiders and the Redcliffe Dolphins, or the Dolphins, the media, there's blood in the water. Like there are piranhas in a frenzy around the club right now. They're going after Brad Arthur, they're going after players, they're going after football administration. And, that, as we spoke about in the podcast, is reflective of failures at each level there, whether it's preparation, whether it's players executing game plans, whether it's our recruitment and development, all of which have, contributed to what's happening right now. But at the end of the day, we're 3-4. If we win 3 games in a row, starting with this week, obviously, suddenly the outlook on the season changes massively. So it's good for RCG to be out there talking the talk, but the team, and I know they're banged up, and I know they're undermanned, and I know that there's all sorts of issues. No Mitchell Moses, Guffer was clearly on one leg. We got Bryce Cartwright, who was being, in the media was, saying he was getting needled to play. Like, this is how tough things are. We got guys that are actual walking wounded out there battling the play. But it's still just 80 minutes of football. And you get the win this week, suddenly you're back at parity, you're at 4-4, you're going into a bye. And, it doesn't fix everything, but suddenly the outlook isn't as bleak as it was, a day ago.
Yeah, you've nailed it in terms of where the season sits in terms of possibilities, because 3-4 that's nothing, but it is that manner of the losses that has Eels supporters.
Yeah, it's the context behind the numbers, and it's why stats don't tell the full picture. But in saying that, you're still 3-4. Like, I understand people being upset about how we've lost the Raiders and to the Dolphins, and especially in the matter of the Dolphins, that second half collapse was just awful. But like I said, 2-3 wins now, and suddenly you're climbing the ladder and you're flying. So I'm not saying we can do that, because there are clearly issues again on multiple levels. But a win against Manly is certainly the way you got to start it, and there's got to find a way this week.
I'll tell you what, the way I'm looking at this, John, is that obviously I want to win out of this game. The heart is desperately hoping for a win. The head's not quite on board with it because of what we've seen over 2 of the last 3 matches. 3 of the last 4. I need to adjust that because we're including the Tigers' performance as well. The Eels, the players have not produced in the way that they should be. Brad Arthur called them out, called them part-time players, questioned whether they wanted to actually be regular NRL players. And I think there are supporters who believe that there were players who threw in the towel last week. It's hard to argue with them. And the only thing that I will say, and this isn't meant as a defence, But if you go to Darwin and you're not doing what needs to be done, it can unravel in a very, very ugly way because of the conditions up there. And the further that the Eels fell behind, the further that they were then without the ball, the worse things got. And it
Ironically,
exposed.
I was
Yeah,
saying, ironically, given the conditions, it snowballs.
yeah. And we've spoken about this in the past. I'm well on the record about my thoughts on taking a game to the tropics. To me, it's nonsensical because by choice, you're taking a home game away from a time of the year where the conditions are actually close to ideal for football, where you have a chance of some dry tracks, weather that's not too hot, and I know that they feel they're not maybe going to get a big crowd against some of these Queensland clubs, but they don't even enjoy home support up in Darwin. They've called themselves the Territory Eels for a long time, but we're getting crowds that are turning up and supporting the Queensland teams. And I know that it makes commercial sense and all of that, but it needs to end. It needs to end now. It is not an excuse for how the players performed last week, but it's also a reason why it can get as ugly as it does up there. What we have to have is a team that is committed to perform at their best this week. And for me, look, I want the win, but more than anything else, I just want the team to be performing at their best, and then whatever happens, happens. If they don't turn up, have a genuine crack, which I don't think anyone's going to argue and suggest they had a genuine crack last week. If they don't turn up and have a genuine crack against Manly, it's going to get ugly, and we can't have that. If they turn up and they have a go and they're not good enough, I don't think there's any Eels supporter that's going to be upset by that.
Oh,
I don't want them
you're
going
being
into
generous,
this.
mate. You're being generous.
Oh, yeah, maybe like in terms of Eels supporters.
In
I know.
in good faith, there won't be an Eels fan that would be disappointed. Yes.
Yeah. But they can't go out there with the mindset of, look, we'll just give it our best.
Oh God,
and,
no.
Whatever happens.
Manly will put 40, 50 points on you. They've got too much.
Yeah,
strike.
they have to be believing that they are going to win. Now, I've been to training this week. I've watched their preparations. Do I believe that the team has prepared well for this week, that their mindset is right for this week's game? From what I observed, yes. But what I'm observing at training doesn't necessarily mean it's going to manifest out there on the field. I'm just saying that I saw everything that I needed to see in terms of the energy, the communication, all that talk that goes on out on the field as they prepare for a game. They looked like a team that was focused on getting a job done this week. Captain's run today, presentation to Ethan Sanders. It was a big day that was there. As I said, I've seen everything that I needed to see, but I went through 2018, and I don't think I missed a training session in 2018. And I can tell you, there were many times I was ready to take up the fetal position 10 minutes into a game after watching them prepare. So who knows what's going to happen, but mate, I don't think they could have done any more on the training track this week. Honestly, don't. So, yeah. How are they going to play this, John? What are they going to do?
Well, a lot of the conversation is going to be about Ethan Sanders in the media, obviously, but the reality is that it's going to be the 16 other blokes helping build a platform and, sheltering and nurturing him on both sides of the ball to allow him to perform to his best. That means from the back, you're going to need some real industrious efforts from, and I'm not going to doubt this from Bailey Simonson. I actually think he's been one of our shining lights in recent weeks, and certainly not Quinton Gufferson, who again is just fighting through an injury that would have sat down a lot of players. I mean, I don't know the specifics here, 60s. This isn't me talking with inside mail, but you can see he is in quite clear distress physically, and he is pushing through it. So those two, I'm not doubting them. But Mike Acevo, he's earned the reprieve this week. It's on him to go out there and lead the way, I think. He needs to be the big Mack truck, setting the platform for the other guys going forwards. I think the Eels need to be really industrious, really coming out of their half, because they can't, even with a quote-unquote, specialist halfback there in Ethan Sanders, he's not going to be Mitchell Moses in terms of clearing the ball and being able to get the Eels out of tricky situations if we're losing the territorial battle. So it's going to be on those guys to set the platform. Beyond that, the Eels forwards, long lauded as one of the best forward packs in the competition. I think it's time for them to stand up. Reg came out, talked the talk, took the responsibility, took the accountability. It's time for, and again, Reg, this isn't a personal gripe against Reg, because we know Brad has been quite, clear about some of the stuff Reg obviously been dealing with on and off the field. We know he's not 100%, but that just means that other guys need to rally. Sean Lane, Ryan Madison, Makatol's making his seasonal debut. I want to see plenty of energy from him. Where Parramatta are letting themselves down, it's not in the complex stuff. It's just in the basics, nitty gritty. It's about line speed. It's about backing up defensively. It's about, not going to sleep around marker and in behind the ruck. Those you're going to get beaten for speed, like outside. At some point in games, it just happens. Teams are so good at generating overlaps. What we saw against the Dolphins was the complete opposite. It was the interior defense of the Parramatta Eels being, softer than jello and just getting torn apart by Jeremy Marshall-King. And while Lachlan Croker hasn't got the acceleration of JMK, he's going to have vultures hang around him like Tom Teboyevich and Daly Cherry Evans and Luke Brooks looking to pick apart the Eels. So ruck defense needs to be locked in. You just need to see good energy across the park. I want to see Brendan Hands working in a clear rotation with Joey Lussick. Joey can't play 60, 70 minutes and then tag Brendan in. I think he's running out of gas. So play Joey for 30 minutes and then bring Brendan in for 10, 15 minutes either side of half time, and then bring Lussick in to close it out, or play Lussick for 40, 50 minutes and then give Brendan the reins to take over the game at the end of the contest. Beyond that, then conversation goes around the halves, and then you're talking about what is the writ for Ethan Sanders. What has BA got in line for him? How much control of the team is he going to take? He is, again, quote unquote, the specialist halfback. So is he going to be the guy that take control of the team and is screaming at senior players to, and you're going to be using colourful language on the field, but telling them to get into position, get in place, get on time, because that's what Mitchell Moses does. He is, if you're out there in a game, he is organising the pants off the team. He is screaming at guys, telling blokes constantly where to be, and getting guys ready. That's what it takes to be the controlling half in this team. That's a huge, huge litmus test for a young half 60s to come in, for a guy that is still finding his way in cup football to come in and do that. So I'm going to be curious to see what his boundaries are in this game, how he's going to not necessarily combine with Dylan Brown, because you do see the 6 and 7 combined these days, but not as much as back in the past. But is he going to be handling the lion's share of the long kicking? And that's something where I thought Dylan has actually improved a bit in recent weeks. So very curious to see how they play, what sides they line up on. Does Dylan still stay on the right edge after making that swap for Dejan Arce? Sanders has been playing left edge in Cup, so that would make sense. And if they do have anything different in terms of attacking looks with a half like Sanders in the team.
John, there's so much to try to unpack with this in terms of what our expectations are around the Eels and what our expectations have been coming into this season. I'm just going to start off quickly about Ethan Sanders. My expectations are I want him to get the basics right, which is first and foremost, make your tackles. All right, you make your tackles, get to the kicks that you've been allocated, and play that confident link role, because they will have their plays and shapes that involve the halves. He just has to confidently execute them. And based on what I've been seeing at training, I think he will be confident. I said in the news podcast after watching training that he had his game face on at training, and I guess that was exactly what I saw again at the captain's run. In terms of what you highlighted with the forwards, we've spoken all season about the Eels and the strength of their forwards. The forwards haven't delivered, especially in these losses. The forwards haven't delivered as they should have. And if our game, and we know this is the fact, our game is based on, the Eels game is based on winning the collision, winning the middle, and then the expansive football comes off that. It's not saying that the football can't be expansive, but what we're seeing is the Eels forwards aren't winning the middle. The expansive football isn't happening with any shred of effectiveness because they're not winning the middle. Now, don't get us wrong. We can see as much as everyone else can that rugby league is changing, that the NRL is changing, that it's becoming more of a speed game. The blunt reality is we don't have the pace in the Eels team to compete against certain teams. Now, we go well against Penrith every time we play them because the Panthers aren't a particularly fast team. If you look at their backs...
No, exactly. There are plenty of powerhouses and explosive athletes. Like, they will win the contact against lots of teams, but they don't dominate with speed.
They don't have players in that team like a Jason Saab, for example, like Khan Pereira on the Gold Coast. Anyone that's got fast, elite players has a chance of causing problems for the Eels. And it is ironic, isn't it, that the team that's the most dominant in this era doesn't pose fears for the Eels in terms of their backline play. And it's obvious, it's there to see in the results. So our concern is always when there is a team that poses a different threat. And this week, Manly, they're one of those teams that poses a different
Saab,
threat.
Tommy T, Cooler, Garrick, they're all flyers. You know, they've all got real serious pace. So, and look, we say, isn't it funny, the context of a month in the game? It comes back to my comments about we're 3-4, a few wins suddenly. It doesn't fix everything, but the ship gets righted significantly. These two teams met a month ago, and the Parramatta Eels were down 14-0, ended up winning 28-24, played some great football in the second half. They nullified the speed of Manly in that second half, but they were also vulnerable to it in the first. So the Eagles have a game plan. They have a blueprint to beat the Sea Eagles. It's going to be on the players to go out there and execute now. And maybe it's going to take a bit of good luck because, you know, Lord knows the Eels haven't had much luck this season. Again, injuries and whatnot have been pretty brutal. But, yeah, like...
And people talk about Mitch Moses is not going to make a difference to the Eels team. And I agree. Last week, wouldn't have mattered if Mitch Moses was out there. We got belted through the middle.
Well, you're right. You're right about the second half, but Mitchell Moses being out there for the first 45, 50 minutes would have meant the Eels would have converted more opportunities in the points too. Like
without
it's a complex
question.
answer, but again, like the point of your argument being that he doesn't fix the defensive issues that we saw in that rout in the final 30 minutes of the game. No,
but where he is important to the Eels is if the Eels are able to be far more effective with the work of their pack, he's one of the first players that can build play off it. So he is a big missing component still. I'm not sure who takes the kicks this week, John, because even in watching training, I don't know whether Ethan, who's the goal kicker in New South Wales Cup, whether he's
I wouldn't be comfortable with even kicking goals.
Well, then we saw what happened with Gutho. do we expect Gutherson
Yeah.
to be taking the kicks when his one and only kick last week he went hobbling and
Looked like
trying to
someone
knock
had
his
shot him.
knee into
Yeah.
place?
I
Yeah,
don't know.
after the
I don't
kick.
know, mate. But Ethan, very talented young playmaker, no doubt. I don't think, based on what I've seen from junior reps and cup, that he is an NRL goal kicker, and maybe he can go work on that and become a sharpshooter and make me eat my words. But yeah, that does put us in a bit of a tricky situation because Sean Russell, who is one of the other tertiary options, has been dropped. And again, that's not me complaining about that. I think he deserved to be or warranted a time down in reserve grade after what we saw in Darwin. But that then leaves you with very interesting. I mean, Brendan Hands can kick goals, but he's on the interchange, and again, he's not a noted kicker. Yeah, I suppose you're hoping that Clinton Gutterson's knee can hold together because, yeah, Dylan has kicked goals before too. So
I was going to say I have seen Dylan take kicks at training
and he's,
as well.
Again, not a noted goal kicker, but he's probably in the same bracket as Ethan. So
he didn't. Let's face it. When the more recent times we've seen Dylan kick, he doesn't strike. He wasn't striking it well, but like he's just not a natural kicker. I can say that when I've seen him more recently, he strikes the ball well. That's all I'll say in that regard. Maybe this is time for Junior to step up, mate.
Well, there's a lot of individuals that love a kick at training, don't they? In the warm down segment of training and having a bit of a sharp shooting competition with the other fellas. So it's been a long time since we've seen a goal kicking prop. So it'd be certainly a sight. But yeah, that does raise a very interesting question: is that the reality of the Parramatta Eels going up in fours if Gutherson isn't healthy to kick here? So I don't know. Look, maybe they'll give it to the rookie. Maybe they'll say, this is your team. You're going to be kicking the goals. But like I said, based on what I've seen, and again, this isn't me attacking Ethan. Like he's got plenty of time to become a better goal kicker. I just feel like he's been very streaky. He's had some games in the reps where he'd kick 5, 6 out of 7. But then you have other games where he pushes relatively, not knockovers, but relatively straightforward conversion attempts from either side of the post wide. So I don't know. Yeah, I just hope Guffo's knee is up to it, which I doubt, given that it's a relatively it's a normal turnaround, a 7-day turnaround from Darwin to here. So yeah, don't know who goal kicks.
Yeah, well, that'll be interesting. But I'll come back to what I was saying there before. We've got to have the forwards absolutely step up.
Yeah,
because people are, and it's right. Like the game. There's teams that are now a lot faster, play a lot faster than what the Eels are playing. But then I say to people, have a look at the roster and tell me how the Eels can play terribly differently. Now, doesn't mean that they can't have different tactics, doesn't mean they can't approach things differently. But if the forwards are playing as they are capable of playing, then they can create that, they can get the defence on the back foot, get the defence marching backwards. It opens up opportunities then for them to become more expansive. But we can't have like the amount of time that the Eels were in the red zone last week in the first half and just not converting opportunities. That was pretty ordinary from the team last week. Now, they weren't awful in the first half. In fact, I thought it had been relatively controlled and composed. A couple of opportunities missed, but I wasn't at panic stations at the end of the first half. But we didn't have to go far in the second half for us to feel panic stations because things just were looking ugly even before they became ugly. So, look, it still starts and ends for the Eels with the forwards getting their job done. They haven't got it done lately, and it's going to make it a lot easier for a rookie half to have a great first game if he's playing behind a team that gets the job done in the forwards. So, mate, I guess now we start to get to our predictions.
Yeah, and again, this is going to be a case of head versus heart, isn't it, 60s? Because the Eels were dreadful in Darwin. But they were dreadful against Canberra and backed that up into a surprise upset against the Cowboys crucially at CommBank Stadium. And I think that's going to be a factor here. I think the sensible tip is that Manly win here, and they probably end up winning handsomely. Parramatta are down on confidence, they're down on troops. In general, the vibes just aren't great right now. I think there's a lot of, like I said, the piranhas are in the water right now. There's a bit of blood, a bit of chum, and there's a bit of a frenzy going around. So I think the sensible tip here is a pretty solid Manly win, maybe even a blowout. In saying that, while we'll be doing this podcast, if we're not going to tip a Parramatta win in these sort of situations, I think this win or loss or a result, either way, if it ends up being a draw on Golden Point, I mean, this is, given that there's a bye coming up, and you got some talk about getting some troops back on the other side, maybe this result dictates the tone of the entire midpoint of the season for the Parramatta Eels. If they win against the odds, as improbable as it is, Manly going to be the heavy favourites on an emotional level, on an outright form level, on a player personnel and talent level. If they can engineer the upset this week, go into the bye, they're not going to get 100% healthy. They're too wounded for that, but they're going to get healthier. They'll get some guys back. Maybe Mitchell Moses is back. If not, he's not. Maybe he's only a week or two off. Then there is a reason to legitimately think that, well, we're not going to go win a premiership necessarily. Like, we're not going to jump around and say, hey, let's get on board for that. Maybe they can get back to being a competitive top 8 contender. But it's going to take a lot of effort, 60s. A lot of effort. It's going to take guys standing up, guys that haven't stood up all season. It's going to take guys that have been doing a decent job to take a step towards doing a great job. And you got to be relieving guys like Gufferson, guys like Bailey Simonson, who are both carrying knee injuries. Bailey got that hip drop tackle a couple of weeks ago. Guffo, well, I don't know if it's a lingering meniscus issue from what happened last season or if there's some other issue, legacy or fresh, in one of those knees. You can't be putting all the effort on them. You can't be putting it on the shoulders of the rookie half in Ethan Sanders. You're looking at Mike Acevo, Will Pennicini, Morgan Harper, Reg, Joey, Junior, Lane, Madison, guys that have had various degrees of form this season. They need to bring it all together today, tomorrow. Don't do it today because I need you to turn up tomorrow. And if they do that, well, look, if they do anything near that, they can not only be competitive, they can win and win well. Like, for all our moaning and again, moaning, it's justified moaning, I know, but in the context of being fans and not being able to do much else but moan and complain about, gaps in the roster, about talent that's not there, about development that might have gone the way that, it should have, about, how we prepare for games and whatnot. On a player-to-player basis, there is still plenty of talent in this roster. And if they put it all together and if they dig deep, they can absolutely, beat Manly and beat Manly well. But it's going to be on the players to decide whether it's not about just deciding whether they want to, compete, but, overcoming some adversity here, about, getting through some niggles and stuff that they're carrying and form that they're lacking and putting it all together for 80 minutes to sit Manly on their ass and go into the bye with some momentum and maybe shut the critics up for at least a week.
So what's your score, mate?
Again, the head says Manly win well, but I'm gonna flip the script here. Parramatta 22 to Manly 16.
Okay. I think there's so much that you just ran through there as the possibilities, and where I have to agree is all of those senior players lifting. We can't have anyone who isn't at their best this week. We know that if the Eels switch off for any period of time, and it might only be to switch off for 30 seconds, Manly are quite prepared to shift that ball on their own quarter line. They're quite prepared to go for trick shots like a crossfield kicks to the wingers. If we allow them to get on the outside of the Eels players, we've got no one who can chase them down. That's just fact, right? So we have to be on our guard for the full 80 minutes. Even if we get some sort of lead, we've got to be restricting what their options are. And that comes from everyone from the inside out doing their role and paying attention to what's going on in front of them the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't allow them to dictate the game at any point. Not at any point. They're going to have the crowd against them. They're going to have a vastly faster team that they're lining up against. So, yeah, look, I'm a bit like you. I've got the heart saying something, the head saying something. The heart says the heart's been won over by what I've actually seen at training. I truly believe that the Eels are going to put in a much better effort this week. I really believe they're going to have a red hot crack and are going to test Manly. The heart is hoping for the win. The head, unfortunately, thinks that Manly might get this by a scoreline of something like 36-26 or 36-28, around that mark, that Manly get into the 30s, Parramatta get into the 20s. Now, I'm going to say as well, when I give my punting tip on goals preview, just be aware I never punt on Parramatta, and I'll give you a reason for today why I don't. I had a bet in the Warriors game against the Gold Coast, and I had a couple of cards going. One of them was that there was 55 points or more scored in the game, and we got a try disallowed to Rocco Berry. It was towards the end, and to me, that looked like a knockback all the way.
I don't know what a knock-on is anymore in this game, Sixties.
No.
But we've been tweaking all these rules across the last few years, and some way, somehow, suddenly a knock-on and knockback is the point of emphasis or point of discussion right now. Something that direct knockdown that we've seen in other weeks has always been ruled a knock-on, but now sometimes it's a knockback. So, and then you get other instances like we saw with Rocco Berry this week, where what you thought would have been a knockback is now called a knock-on. So I don't.
Well, surely the Titans player knocked the ball towards the Warriors, and then it came off the back. It looked like come off the back of Watini Zalesniak's hand and travelled backwards towards Rocco Berry.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. I had Rocco Berry down for 2 or more tries in a Warriors win. And it was nice. The odds were very, very nice. So that's what I can do to a result when it carries my money.
Maybe you can reverse the hoodoo if you bet on the Eels, I suppose.
No, hang on. It gets worse. If there was a player in the St. George and Roosters game that I backed to score a try, who do you think it would be?
Future Eels Acclimax?
No.
Ben Hunt?
I want you to think about what happened in the game and about the
about who got knocked out in the first seconds of the contest?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay. And this is why we don't let you bet on the Dally M for the Parramatta Eels, by the way.
It's why I don't bet on Eels games, period. So
yeah,
so when I give my punting
why aren't you betting on opposition? That's what I got to ask you. Why aren't you betting on Manly this week?
Well, I know that there's a few Eels supporters that know me that beg me to back the opposition. Maybe this is the week where I do that. I don't know. But anyway, I just thought I'd mention that as we're in that tips phase. First try scorer, I'm going to go, do you know what? I want to go for Sivo in this one. He's first grade. I've got to go for the big buller. And best on field for the Eels this week. I think it's a week for Jermaine Hopgood.
You know what? So. He actually wasn't bad up in Darwin either. He actually made a great effort on one of those ridiculous tries the Dolphins scored at the end to make the tackle, but the board still got away from him. I don't even know who's going to score first try, but I just hope it's the Parramatta Eels Sixties. It feels like, I know he scored first in Darwin, but it feels like most of the season we've been behind on the scoreboard early on. So Sivo was actually a good shout. I don't know. Maybe Morgan Harper, maybe on a little kick again, coming through. And
against his old team, mate, that sounds like cool.
And then best on field, look, I know he's got the young half, the specialist halfback with him, but if the Eels are going to win, we need a big one from Dylan. He's got to be out there, creating and somehow not just creating half breaks, but converting it into something more. And that's not me again attacking him. I wish we would game plan more around Dylan's ability to break a tackle and create a half break every week. But Dylan's got to have a huge game. So I'm going to be boring. I'm going to tip the obvious candidate here because obviously Gufferson's another one there, but I think Gufferson's too busted to necessarily carry the Eels to win. He can be the guy there that can be the holding the door open for someone else, but we need someone else to be kicking that door down in relation to getting the win. So I'll go with Dillbags.
Yeah, mate. Mate, that pretty much comes. That brings us to the end of our preview podcast. We just wanted to say a few words just on the passing of Terry Hill. His passing is probably something that shocked people because he's still a relatively young man at 52 years of age.
Crazy.
He was one of those players who was capable of turning a match on his own through something that he did on the field. He was someone who was one of those characters who was almost larger than life. Certainly he had some enjoyable appearances on the footy show back in the day. And we send out our condolences to all of Terry's loved ones, to the people who are closest to him, and also to the supporters that backed him along the way, the Manly supporters or whatever club that Terry was playing at. So, it's a very sad time to have a player who is actually part of recent memory to pass away. So, and it's a very sobering thought on this occasion. So,
I was going to say, he's obviously a tremendous player on the field. He played representative football for New South Wales and Australia, but he's also going to be part of, not an immortal in the sense of his efforts on the field, but he played a pivotal course or part in the course of rugby league history in terms of the draft system. He was
absolutely
the way rugby league is right now, and the tribal and tribalistic approach that we see, players being developed by clubs and being aspirational clubs, is the fact that it still is the way it is by and large due to him and other people too. There was 126 other plaintiffs, but yeah, going against the draft system. So a huge part of rugby league history there, and obviously our sincerest thoughts go out to his family and friends, because like you said, it is very sobering seeing. And I know you see current players pass away tragically due to circumstances beyond their controls, but when you see someone of that generation passing as well, it just reminds you that times are changing, isn't it? There's more bad news on the horizon in that regard, which is always, like you said, very sobering.
Yeah. So, mate, it's a sad note on which to end the podcast. But before we go, thank you, John, for another fine effort in this podcast. Thank you to all of our listeners who tune in every week, and especially we are always grateful for the messages that we receive about the podcast, the people that reply on the Eels on the Cumberland Throw website. That's always appreciated when you take the time to do that. But of course, especially thank you to Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta for your support. And don't forget that every Eels home game, you'll see us at Parramatta Leagues Club. Sometimes we'll be before the match, sometimes after the match. Keep an eye out for whether we're doing a pre-game preview or a post-match instant reaction live. When we do that, almost every time we're going to have one of the Eels legends. So you can come along, say good day to us, have a listen to some footy talk, and get to meet an Eels legend player. And so keep an eye out for our next home game. And apart from that, as I always say, go you mighty Eels.